Hi, folks. Good evening. It is 6:05, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This is our meeting of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. We're so glad that folks can be joining us this evening. This is the fourth Tuesday of the month. So this is a meeting for our fight against data-driven policing. My name is Tiff. I use they and them pronouns. I've been a member of the coalition for a number of years now, and I co-facilitate this space along with Hamid and with support of a number of additional folks, Matios, Shakir, and a number of folks who also support and do work in many of our working groups as well. So we will go ahead and get started. Again, so glad to have folks join. We do want to encourage folks to get comfortable, participate in whatever way you would like. We do have the chat open. Please raise your hand or indicate if you would like to, if you have a question or would like to make a comment, anything like that. We do like to keep it conversational. And also, before we go over the agenda, just want to let folks know about other coalition meetings that we do have on other Tuesday nights of the month. So this is our fourth Tuesday, Fight Against Data-Driven Policing. On the first Tuesday of the month, though, we also have our working group for surveillance through the lens of gender and sexuality, and how folks are surveilled and policed through those lenses as well. For the second Tuesday of the month, we have the Fight Against the War on Youth. And then for the third Tuesday, that is when we have our general coalition meeting. We have started meeting again in public for that one. The other ones are online. And yeah, we're really excited to have folks join. And you are welcome to join any of those, and also contact us if you'd like more information on joining any of our working groups as well. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So as far as the agenda this evening, we are going to be talking about the archiving project, which we are very excited to hear more about. And yeah, so that is going to be kind of the majority of the first part of our meeting. We'll be getting an update on this project that has been going on for a number of years now, really gathering all of the documentation that has been gathered by folks through various working groups, compiling them, putting them into a space online where they will be accessible to folks. And so we're really excited. It's been a lot of work from a lot of folks. And so we're really excited to hear more about that. And then for the second part of the meeting, we're going to be talking about the LAPD budget, which was announced this past Friday. It was on the agenda at the police commission today. They talked about it. They passed it through to the mayor. So we're going to talk a bit more about like what is in that budget. So for this first part, I will now hand it over to Hamid to facilitate this part about the archiving project. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tiff, and welcome everybody. My name is Hamid, go by he, him at Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. So we are going to spend the first good 45, 50 minutes or so in speaking about a project that got launched in spring of 2020. And one of the primary reasons for us was that as organizers building collective power on the ground, one of the key elements that we have been using and kind of just building our knowledge is through collective learning. And for our purposes of organizing, we really build our conversations through storytelling. That how do we bring the story of the police state, of the national security police state, to our communities? How do we collectively unpack what's happening on the ground, both structurally, operationally, what kind of narratives are being built? How do we debunk it? How do we expose the level of state violence that remains sort of hidden at times, as to how this is being unleashed? Who in the academy is involved in this thing? What kind of corporate support is the state getting? What kind of just other forms of just material support that is so deeply infused in building state power and state violence? So in order for us to do that, we started, one of the earliest things we started weaponizing was the California Public Records Act request. and really filing extensive public records on various LAPD programs that helped us then, just map the structures of policing, the operations of policing, and better understanding that what happens on a day-to-day basis. And, in a very simple way, just to say that just doing like almost a body scan, an MRI of this extremely violent organization. So through the years, we have gathered, hundreds and hundreds of documentation, public records. We've also released reports, which are another way for us in our storytelling as well. And these reports are also very much community-based, even the public records, the process, with all respect to the lawyers, we kind of just try to keep the lawyers out of it. But then, Shakir, who's a brilliant community lawyer, part of our team at Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, we just released a zine as well on filing for public records, and especially that's focused towards movement lawyers. So we're going to post that link up here too. So for us, it was really crucial that when we file for public records, what is the purpose to do that? Why are we filing for these public records? This is not just like through a lawsuit or litigation where you're doing discovery and you kind of narrowly asking for documentation, but it's about the whole infrastructure, about everything that relates to a particular program, whether it's predictive policing or see something, say something, or the drone program or body cameras, or you name it. So that's what led to then, okay, so how do we bring it all together and kind of create our own sort of a hood archive, or just our community-based archive, where this could be done in a way where we develop it would not only uploading documents, but also develop folksonomies, which I'm going to pass it on to my comrade Dylan, who's been kind of really co-leading and shepherding this project. But how do people do this research in real time, where they are not stuck in the state's language, and how do we kind of just take away the state's sort of control about the narrative of these documents as well? That it's not just a public records that, okay, well, this is not just an audit, which is more like a memo. Well, this is something that, where there's a complete failure of this whole notion of accountability and transparency as they talk about it. So there's several moving parts to it. And today, what our hope was to just do a little bit of a sneak preview and kind of a soft launch and bring folks together to give their feedback of what they think. And this continues to be, we're constantly sort of desperately in search of resources to help support that. So it's really a labor of community coming together and people volunteering their time. So with that, I want to pass it on to Dylan, who I just really want to honor the work that Dylan has done, and really kind of shepherding us through this process. And just a little bit, Dylan has been also with the coalition for a long time. If people have seen our drone-free LAPD, No Drones LA posters and that fight, and this going back almost about 8-9 years, that was all Dylan's work too, which really helped us in getting the word out and telling the story about the use of drones by the Los Angeles Police Department. So Dylan, on to you.
Thanks, Hamid. Hi, everyone. So I'm Dylan. She, her pronouns. I am an artist, community organizer, primarily with a background in migrant justice organizing. Now I'm a PhD candidate in Los Angeles. So I did want to, I wasn't sure to what extent I should kind of give an overview about the archive, but because there are folks here who are not familiar, I'll explain it a bit. But essentially today is also kind of the first time that I was hoping that we'd get kind of internal feedback within the coalition, because we were sending out this website to the different working groups in the coalition for their feedback about what they like about it, what's useful for them, what they like updates on, or what they prefer. So I suppose I should show the website. So this is what the archive website currently looks like. And this is the work of Aldo, who's our web developer, UX, UI designer, and Ben, who is our web developer. Aldo is the designer, Ben is the web developer. And if you would like to have a sense of actually our process, the way in which we are able to launch this work, this is I've linked our documentary, our kind of shorter 30-minute documentary that is available on YouTube to the chat. There you can see our kind of initial archive team, including Jamie, Aldo, Ben, Kyle, our computational tools person, Hamid, and myself. Let's see. So we have this beautiful website. We have stories, which is basically a timeline. These are 2 timelines of our community fights, the coalition's community fights. So this is the timeline against predictive policing. The coalition's fight began in 2004, and it points to specific documents within our collection that would be relevant in relation to this archive, in relation to this timeline. And this is still a work in progress, or these stories are still a work in progress, or this predictive policing timeline is pretty complete. But in terms of the other community fights that the coalition is a part of, it's kind of endless. So we have 2 at the moment. This is our timeline for academic complicity, or the fight against academic complicity. And onto our collections. So the interesting thing about working with community organizers. So the way that I understand the archive is that it's really it's different in that the work is still ongoing. There's the archive still has an efficacy in the present because it's meant to function for community organizers, and be also a resource while it is an archive. So, or kind of also functions as this kind of an archive. So so in trying to kind of curate these materials, we were thinking about collections as also these aspects of our community fights. So in thinking about like, okay, well, there's going to be the stuff that I was thinking about, and as in terms of the archival form, it's like, okay, like, yes, there's the original order that the materials came in, right? And then there's the order that the materials that the coalition members put the materials in, right? So what is the kind of order that we want to preserve? That was one of the questions. It's still a question I have, right? So because the kind of metadata, when coalition members and community members start, making edits to the documents, that affects the metadata. That might change up the original kind of information that was stored in the documents and replace it with coalition metadata. So stuff like that, where it's like, okay, how much do we retain? What do we care about what we retain? Obviously certain metadata is important. I mean, the original metadata is relevant and important to keep, but it's also another layer of archival folksonomic material to emphasize and keep the ways in which metadata has changed based on what the coalition has been doing with it. So I suppose I should backtrack a little bit. Okay, so metadata, for those who don't know, it's basically data about data. So for example, and this is part of our also kind of pedagogical, like kind of toolkit in terms of we're introducing people to concepts within archives that about archives that might be new to them, because we are committed to decolonizing knowledge, developing community knowledge. So we have pedagogical kind of materials to go along with how we talk about archiving. So metadata is data about data. For example, if you right click on a file, hit properties, what you get is technical metadata, right? So file type, file size, creation, date, time, and what we've been focusing on. So what I was kind of sort of talking about was the technical metadata. So when like coalition members start changing up files and renaming them and reorienting them into different folders, categorizing them differently, and basically changing up state documents in a way that is more useful to us. It's like, that's something that is actually important. It's like, yes, it's different from the original order of the documents, but it's also something we want to keep a record of, because that is part of the community knowledge, that changing up of the technical metadata. Additionally, what we're focusing on is descriptive metadata. So title, subject, genre, summary, and I'm going to go to this term for folksonomies, because what we're trying to develop is folksonomies, or also known as there's a number of names, right? Democratic indexing, user-generated metadata, grassroots taxonomy, metadata for the masses, people-powered metadata. Essentially, it's a kind of community vernacular, right? So what I realized was that, because the nature of our archive, it consists predominantly of state documents received by the LAPD. There's a lot of violent language used in these documents that do not resonate with us as community members, right? So in an effort to kind of circumvent and respond to that, we decided to develop the notion of we decided to develop folksonomic alternatives. So, for example, when people are categorized by the LAPD as transient, as chronic offenders, or by their, arrest history, or when, neighborhood names are labeled that, based on like the jurisdiction or the bureaus, or particular kind of geographic locations that are used by the LAPD, that's really, that's not how we understand ourselves. That's not how we understand, our neighbors and neighborhoods. And, many of us and many of our community members might actually be familiar with this kind of policing language, but, that's also not the way in which we want to kind of label ourselves. When we browse the archive, when we want to do research, community research, we want to be able to search using terms that are more, that are familiar and not less violent, in the very least, to us and our communities. So that was kind of the motivation for the metadata, the folksonomic metadata for this project. So where you might see this is, okay, so, this is like a cute PowerPoint, for example, created by somebody analyzing the positives of, smart policing in Los Angeles. So, the metadata might, you might see some of it on the left here, or it might be just kind of sort of internal tagging, so that, if you Google, or if you not Google, but if you search for, if you search for pig, for example, you get whatever kind of state language equivalent to police. Or the way that we put it into practice also in terms of location, or will be putting it into practices. These are some of the intersections for the watches, like, so this is Central Watch 2 and 4. These are the intersections. So this is, so a member of the coalition went through these maps and started labeling the folksonomic terms, right? So, okay, the U.S. Immigration Court is actually in this area. Hotel Alexandria is in this area. The Olvera Street is, the neighborhood term for what is at Central Watch 3 and 5. So, and in terms of kind of the other folksonomics, so, okay, instead of, there's like, oh, this policy is predpol, what our folksonomic term might be, racial profiling or location-based policing. So this is kind of the way in which we're trying to essentially break apart these state documents for our own uses. So I suppose I should kind of stop there. I don't want to spend too much time describing the archive and its forms and what we were all thinking about in developing this, but we were able to really launch this project because of funding. We were able to get through IBEAM, which is an arts organization based in New York, and the way that we framed this project was, in a sense, a kind of art project, because I am an artist, so a social practice artist. So I was like, okay, well, this is this collaboration with the coalition, and this is my kind of social practice art form of carving with community organizing as the medium through which we make change through time and space. So this, interestingly enough, has had some originary motivations and funding through the arts. Oh, and folksonomies. I can share this really quickly again. So folksonomy, for those who missed it, it's essentially a kind of vernacular, community vernacular. Some people might call it, democratic indexing, grassroots taxonomy, people powered metadata, etc. So, I often use this example. It's like, well, what are the folksonomic terms for the word police? There's a pig, right? That's an easy one. There's, 12, there's a lot of, so there's kind of there's the state language, and there's the kind of folksonomic or folk taxonomies that we all use, that make these languages more familiar to us. So I do want to, again, like, not get too much into it. I haven't been keeping track of how long I've been talking, but because I would really love to hear feedback from everybody else about how what they'd like to see, what they like, what they dislike, et cetera, because we're working towards a soft launch, and the launch is soft because we don't have any folksonomic metadata as of yet, very, very much, because that requires so much capacity. It's like we recently, the latest update is that we recently put out a call for researchers, just community-based researchers. And because there was so much of a response, we began thinking, oh, what if we turn it into a kind of working group, like a research working group, where, because a lot of the kind of archiving and creating the content for the archive, I've made the request of it to coalition members, and everybody is so busy, right? So there has been not very much content that's been developed, and that kind of slows down the developing of folksonomies, because there has to be organizing with community members to be like, okay, like, here are these materials, like, what do you think about this kind of language? And, what are your folksonomic terms? And so like, there is a lot of kind of capacity building that has to happen. So we've put that call out for, community researchers, so that who are solely doing archival research, right? Like I told Hamid recently, like, don't steal my volunteers. Like, I know that the work of the coalition is very exciting, and the way that y'all describe it is just like, like, it really draws you in. And I'm just like, no, please do the work of the archive. And even if, it's difficult and the language is violent, and it's, like, and it's probably not a process that's familiar to many of you, like, please stick with it, because, the archiving work, I believe, is also important. I mean, if you must be drawn towards, the kind of fight against academic complicity and, war against youth, et cetera, that's obviously, that's great. But, we also are hoping for people who will, be consistent with, like, poring over these documents, and so that we can, to work towards developing this archive. We also, we're focused on the CIPRAs right now, the Public Records Act documents, but we also do want to, develop an internal archive of the coalition's work, right? So even just like the ton of flyers that they've created, and the newsletters they send out, and so I mean, that's more of a project, a kind of slower project that's going to happen more gradually, because some of the materials are still active, and some of the work is still active. So and what do you want to keep public, and what do you want to keep internal, et cetera, et cetera. So, but we are also thinking towards archiving the specific coalition kind of materials, documents, Google document, community documents, flyers, and et cetera, videos, photographs. And then we absolutely do want to also have a physical archive, because housed at the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition office, the LA CAN office location, so that the archive is accessible to those without consistent use of the internet, or without access to a smartphone, et cetera. So again, that's like an incredible, we need to be incredibly resourced to be able to do that, right? So, so for the moment, it is, working with, this digital archive with largely with the CIPRA materials that are already in PDF form by and large. Is it open? The archive is completely, I mean, it's password protected right now, just because we haven't typically launched, but it's completely, open source. It's technically even, the materials are technically even available to download through the Los Angeles kind of city portal currently, like, if you know what to search for. The way that we're trying to do it with the coalition is, consolidated in, different ways, and folksonomic ways, et cetera. Yes, we can share the call for community kind of archival researchers. I mean, there's been a mix of response. We're open to anybody. Like, you don't have to have any archiving experience, or you can have a ton of archiving experience. Like, we will take anyone willing to offer their time. And again, I'd love to open up the floor to anybody who'd like to respond, share their thoughts about the archive as it is.
So a couple things, Dylan's, okay, so Martius already responded to Kelly's question about information on the community archival researchers, call out for that. And let's see. Okay, so Emily. Okay, thank you so much, Emily. Just please, if you don't mind, if you could email us at stoplapdspine@gmail.com, and then we can follow up on that if you don't want to share your, or unless if you want to share your contact information here in the chat. But yeah, so opening it up first, just just maybe Dylan, we could just kind of get a general sense, and then maybe if there any particular feedback that some of the working groups have. So maybe just a general sense of what you all have heard, particularly on folksonomies and developing that, and just the layout, just a thought about that. So any thoughts, initial thoughts from folks? I know our work usually leaves people speechless, but come on now.
Well, I'll jump in. I'm kind of new to this.
Please, Monica, thank you.
Thank you for the invite. I just wanted to say, you can tell a lot of work went into it. It seems easy to maneuver, which is very important when we talk about doing community work. The metadata, being able to search is also very important as well. So I think so far, from what I've seen, a tremendous lot of work went into it and would greatly benefit the community. So I'm new to LA, so just learning about the process, working at the Bunch Center and working on the Archiving and Age of Mass Incarceration project. So just excited about what you're doing, and hopefully future opportunities to collaborate. So I just want to share that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it. Other thoughts?
I have a couple questions. It's okay.
Please, please, Kelly.
So I'm just curious to know how many collections you imagine curating would be the first one. Are those community-driven naming processes as well? And the curation, is that community-driven as well? Like, where is that happening? And then in terms of preservation, it sounds like you're going to have an on-site set of copies at LA CAN. And are you also going to have digital preservation as well? So I'm thinking 100 years from now, how do we make sure, I'm thinking as a historian, that these records are still available if that's what you all want to see happen?
Dylan?
Yes. Okay. So how many collections? So far, we've been kind of thinking about it in terms of community fights. So we imagine, so it's been kind of more coalition member, like working group driven. So Predpol, drone report, academic complicity, gender and sexuality, and so on. So it has and it hasn't been the community driven in a way. I proposed it to kind of be organized in this way because I thought, it's people are already looking at the CIPRA documents in each, like different CIPRA kind of documents in each working group, and they already have so much kind of particularized research around it in their own working groups, and it seemed like that that might be the easiest way to do it. But this would also be, I think, a question for the working groups, because I mean, I would love to see more working group engagement in terms of, like, what would a community driven curation of a collection look like. For the predictive policing collection, Jamie, a long time coalition member, and along with Tiff and along with folks who are part of the working group, they were really they were the ones who organized the documents that you see on the website. But there are certainly different ways in which curating the collections could be approached. Because I'm not myself like into the nitty gritty of the working groups. I can't really, I don't really have any suggestions because I do, but but also it's been I've been making requests, and that's mostly what I've been able to do. It's also up to the working groups to want to do this archiving. But it's been less prioritized, I'll say.
Maybe
and-
one way to look at that also is that if I understand correctly, Kelly, that that our public records requests are informed from the get-go by community's experience and their interests. So in a sense that what those documents that we receive, and I'll give you one small example of predictive policing, that when we filed for public records, and actually we're getting into another fight, and that'll be interesting to see where it goes. So we invite people, and this is our fight to end social media surveillance of the LAPD. So I'm getting ready to file a set of public records. So that would be where people would come in, and we have Pancake here as well, and I remember Pancake and several other folks in the community just sitting there in Freedom Room and just kind of having a conversation that what do we want to know about predictive policing, and that's when people start saying that I'm interested as to what are they thinking about it. How did this thought come to them? I'm interested in how much money is being spent. I'm interested that how many pigs are attached to this program. I'm interested in, so that sort of interest then brought the whole creation of that request together as well. And what that did was that really helped us understand just the very from the basics or the baseline of what the thinking was. So for example, that from the thinking part of it, we demanded their initial grant request going back to 2012 or whenever it was, to the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So in that grant request for the money, they laid out the purpose. They laid out what the expectations were. They laid out what the reporting would look like. They laid out what the budget would look like. So now that structure, the development is kind of just being unpacked as well. So in that way, and I think it would be, just that came together, the creation of this archive and curating it in a way that it shows people's interest. I'm thinking more like maybe the folksonomy piece is another way of where, when people say, what's up with the Popos across the bridge? So now that's Popos across the bridge, our Hollenbeck division. Right. So, how do we then do that thing where, okay, what's happening across the bridge in Hollenbeck in Boyle Heights? That just kind of tells another way of telling a story too. So I don't know if that makes sense, but just wanted to throw that little background as well.
Yeah, that's like absolutely. That's a great point. It's like the meaning making has been happening since the research for the CIFRES, and that community research process for what y'all even want to file a PRA request for is ongoing for 6 months or more. It sounds like, from what I understand. And then that request is submitted, and then LAPD gets back to you about this and that, and then that that in and of itself is a curation. And then that's also what we are calling collections. And in terms of the last question about preservation, and we've sort of looked into digital preservation. We have kind of Kyle, who's our computational tools person. So he is able to do things like mass upload, mass download files, and so he's done that for us for a lot of our CIFRES and put them into zip files. And so we have kind of copies that are kind of directly downloaded, downloaded from the LA City portal. And then we have a couple of hard drives where we're keeping that information. So that's to the extent that we really thought about it. But but other than that, it's also just a matter of like resources, capacity, and it's also probably something that maybe Ben could speak to because he's here tonight. He's our web developer, and he also has had kind of direct influence in terms of the kind of the CMS content management platform that we use. So initially we were thinking about like Omeka and Mukurtu and these kind of archiving platforms that are, I believe they're open source or they're free. And they're specifically created for the purposes of archiving. And then had said, well, there's a bit of a learning curve. So that's why we decided to land on WordPress, and Ben has been creating custom code for us on WordPress, so that it's and it is kind of scalable to a quite a decent extent, like I think 500,000 documents or something like that. So and we do plan to release this custom code as part of like an archivist toolkit as well, digital archivist toolkit as well, so that people, community organizers, folks could very easily create their own community archive website through a CMS like WordPress, which has a much easier kind of learning curve. And that's something that we're hoping to develop with like the hard launch.
Any other thoughts, or maybe if there's any feedback from some of the working groups? Matthias, do you want to share first about the Fight Against the War on Youth working group?
Sure. Hey, friends, this is Matthias speaking. I use he, him pronouns with the Stop LAPD Spine Coalition. And yeah, incredible job, everybody that's worked on this. Dylan, obviously, thank you so much for leading the work on this. Yeah, so like we at the War on Youth Work Group were really excited about the prospect of having an archive that's accessible to the community, just because a lot of the times we work directly with youth. We actually got a residency at this after school program called STEAM to the Future for next year, working with 1st through 6th graders. And a big aspect of the curriculum we're developing is conducting research on matters. So this is definitely a tool we want to use. And even the prospect of folksonomies, I think, I really hope we do bring youth into it, just because there are so many aspects of these documents, like these predictive policing programs like PredPol and Laser and whatnot, that incorporate things like anchor points or PredPol hotspots, which have just been rebranded as neighborhood engagement areas, which are just like areas that police like inundate, right? And we know that when we talk to youth, like mostly high schoolers, about where they experience policing the most or where they see police, it is often like a bus stop that they go to and that they have in mind, or like a little corner store on their way home or to school. And so it'll be great to name that or identify these locations and incorporate that to how these like neighborhoods are, like how our neighborhoods are identified in these documents. So really excited about the prospect of folksonomies in that way. And yeah, one, subverting the state's language, but I think there's genuine major utility in identifying the places we form community that are criminalized. But with that in mind, like knowing that we're gonna, use this, and I guess I'll share a screen here, to work with youth, we thought a lot about, oh, it's not the right. And I think folks should be able to see that. We thought a lot about interface and accessibility and just like how to keep youth engaged with using something like this. So one of the first things our working group members, and this is people from the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, the Palestinian Youth Movement, along with, the War on Youth Work Group, kind of talked about, I'm going to go in no particular order, but is this sidebar right here, folks just feel like it's a lot of information condensed in one sidebar, and also that maybe, like, if this column is going to include like this much information, it should maybe be spaced out or bigger. And one person suggested maybe even having this side column be the main page that directs folks to other pages, or having it be collapsible. Yeah. And the other thing is we have these starting points highlighted over here. So what one suggestion I thought was really cool was, when you click on a starting point, you're kind of back here and you have to go to the main page, but maybe have that other starting point on this page as well, so people can just try it out from over here. What else did folks say? Oh, and then for certain pages, like, it might even just be this one, like how to get involved page. So we've got a video here, and there's obviously information to read here. So one of the things, and these are all just like, like accessibility engagement things, but they talked about is like being able to independently scroll on the left side while keeping this static. That way you can keep the video going while you maybe go through this. And, sorry, I'm trying to read my own writing here. Oh, and then in the get involved page, just including some aspects of our Stop LAPD Spying .org website, just like get in touch with us, like a contact sheet, maybe our like socials, or like the other fights, just some more stuff over here. And let's see. And then just like in pages like the about page, or any page that's really just word heavy, just thinking about the youth and thinking about like keeping them engaged, like the bolding of important parts or additions, and the inclusion of images, which I think is something we do really well at the StopLAPDSpying.org website, which we revamped pretty recently. Just including photographs even of, yeah, whatever, us on the street. And then including a just having a bit about understanding or navigating the website, like a how-to page on how to use a website, its different components, which was kind of covered on the about. And I think that's it. But yeah, folks are really stoked about it, especially when we get all our public records on there. Just really, really excited to use this in doing research with you. So, yeah.
Thank you, Matthias.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
that was really great. Really helpful feedback. I'll loop folks. I'll down them into the requests so that they can make updates.
Yeah, I'd love to also, Matthias, because we did this, I know this next residency is for 15 weeks with the 1st through 6th grade. And I know in the summer we had a few days, and I had the really a pleasure of sitting through one. And talking about youth's folksonomy was beautiful. I mean, these were 2nd graders, and how they were speaking about abolition. I mean, it was really, really awesome. And they made this whole video about, just kind of how money is being thrown at LAPD. And so the language, it was just like, I mean, it's as straightforward and direct as it is, like what part of state violence don't we understand? So thank you. I think that would be really awesome. Yeah, I mean, it was fake money, but still it got the message across very clearly. And we're talking about budget right now. So thank you. Tiff, do you have any thoughts from the Data-Driven Policing Working Group?
Yeah, thanks so much, folks. My name is Tiff, they, them pronouns, and yeah, and I've been a part of the fight against data-driven policing for a while now, was a part of that fight since about 2017, when Jamie kind of pulled me in to do a lot of the work and be looking at some of these documents that we're now talking about and see now on this site. So yeah, thanks so much to folks for just the incredible ongoing work and grind that you all have been doing and putting into that. I don't have as detailed feedback as Matios. I like, Matios, that you kind of took it back to the working group and got feedback. I think that's a good idea for us as well with our data-driven policing group, to kind of share it with more folks. Just some initial thoughts. I love the collections, because for me, when in thinking about the archiving, it was always about like, how are we, and there's obviously different aspects of the archiving that are very important and that folks are going to focus on. I had always thought about it in terms of like the importance of sharing out these documents. Like it always felt like when we got these PRA documents, and it was like this incredibly, just like, you know, I mean, you're seeing these maps of people's neighborhoods and how they're being targeted by police and how they're being talked about, and just incredibly detailed information on extremely localized levels, and thinking like, okay, you know, understanding that we have access to this, how are we making this accessible to more folks? And that's always been a part of the conversation. So I think thinking about like, yeah, how are we making that accessible, and then how are we organizing it in a way that it is, the stories and the collections are awesome. Like, I think that's really great. Because that, like, I love the way that is engaging, that does take you through, it does help you make sense. It seems like that would be a good place for someone to start if they maybe weren't sure where to start. So I love that, and the different types of media that's brought in. Like, I see there's like a clip from the police commission meeting, you know, with folks speaking there from 2014, like that's awesome. And yeah, so I think I love that seems like a very useful way to be organizing the information. And then I'm just thinking about like, in terms of like, what would we prioritize? Like, we do have so much information, like we have thousands of documents in the fight against predictive policing. So just thinking about what would we prioritize? But I think those are all conversations that we would have amongst ourselves as a group, I think. And like, how would we put this together? And kind of like Matios, I'm thinking about like, how would this be used by students perhaps? Like, we've already had students, and I forget the name of the high school, that we're looking at maps of their high school about how LAPD was, Roosevelt High, yeah, thank you, policing their area in Boyle Heights, and how those different neighborhoods were labeled. And so how are we making more of these maps accessible? And yeah, so I don't really have any feedback about it. I just think, yeah, it's very exciting. I do really see the importance of this. And I think that for us, for our working group, I think we would have to really make time, like almost make it its own working group within our fight, that this is something that we need to be consistently meeting on and talking about and working on, to be helping get this information on the site. And to be backing up the work that you all are doing, Dylan and Ben and additional folks. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So we got to wrap this part up in about 15 minutes max. So Shakir, Chella, do you all have any feedback on anything?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chella. Shakir?
Yeah, I can share a little. Yeah, thanks everyone who's put a lot of work into this project, and yeah, both like, you know, conceptualizing it and then all the technical work of building it and filling in the records and all that. I think maybe my comments are mostly very just building on what Tiff was saying about, this feeling of like when we get all these records and we're kind of exposing harm, or we are learning about the inner workings of stuff, like kind of this not wanting to keep it to ourselves, not wanting to hoard it, and kind of recognizing that is a lot of how that often, in journalistic spaces and other kind of like modes of getting information and sharing it, that's how you have to approach it, and we don't want to be that way. And so seeing this as a tool for a place that we can put all our records as soon as we get them, or like making it a tool for kind of research and broadening like what we think of as archival research, as not just something that requires really specialized expertise or access to either digital or physical archives that anybody can't walk into, but that even our mode of research is something that happens of just people sitting in a circle or sitting in a Zoom together and like talking about going over records together. That's a lot of what we do in our meetings, is like when it's in person, just like print something out, pass around a bunch of copies, read it together. What do we think of this? And so how do we create like a digital version of that? Something that, and I'm literally just thinking of it as even like a capability of like looking at a page and, multiple people being able to annotate it or share it or add their notes to it, or even to have like a hard link that that then can become a reference point across different work groups looking at something. Part of like most of our records when we get them, and I think this is even true for like right now we've uploaded some of the academic complicity work on there, as well as the predpol and laser fight from years ago. But we're constantly getting new records and new materials, and they mostly just kind of live either on the city's website or in a Google Drive somewhere, and we're not able to kind of just push them out and invite anyone to come and take a spin through them. And so, how do we open up, like, how do we open like the actual materials so people can access them, and also like show people that, like this kind of research and this kind of pouring through government records and figuring out how to tell stories with records is something that anybody can do, and that, that showing how we're doing it in real time in an open place means we'll hopefully get creative with doing the same with budget records or whatever it is. So I think the stories section of the site is kind of does that, but also just how do we make this so that it's like it's not just an archive of kind of past fights, but literally stuff that we've gotten and we still don't know the story. Like we haven't figured out our narrative around. We haven't figured out like what the connections are, and we want to open that up to anybody sitting on their computer wherever they are to like nerd out with those records, and then eventually hopefully bring their analysis to our work groups and kind of bring it to the collective work.
Nice. I really appreciate some of the folks who support the archive work who signed on, are also some of them are on this call as well. So just so that'll be really great. Some of these the feedback that we are getting with that kind of eye and look towards building this thing. Any other thoughts? How should we get involved with specific working groups? Please send us an email at stoplapdscience@gmail.com, and we can definitely plug you in and just have a conversation and then give you a lowdown on the coalition.
There is a get involved section that is quite not as because it definitely needs more content, right? But Shakir, you're bringing up a good point of just like the kind of, because we also do want the archive to have a kind of pedagogical component. So for now we have these two kind of videos, how to file public records, right? So that's the subvert. So, and then eventually there'll be like an archiving toolkit. I mean, in terms of like the collaborative kind of content creation and the annotation, I'm gonna turn to Ben for that to see if that's kind of possible on a technical level or what that would take. It might be like, maybe there's already a kind of extension or an app or something that's already been created, and then we can kind of like just incorporate it in an already existing kind of annotation kind of platform into the website or something like that. But yeah, I do wonder about like also like the website, like if some of these files are like Excel files, which are not kind of viewable, like it only kind of and I do want to, that's something I also have a question about as well for Ben, for although where I'll pull up the same documents again, where yeah, like this like shrunk. I don't know why it's so small, but this like rectangle shrunk, but then the only reason it's viewable like this is because it's PDF. But if it was like a PowerPoint slide or an Excel file, you know, it wouldn't show up like this. You wouldn't be able to have it embedded like this. So, you know, those are some aspects of you know, the website that we're still thinking about. And would people be able to add to the archive if they have a story that is relevant to I want to say yes, or also we did early on, we were thinking about having collections that were like submitted by other people or other organizations, or that we could also be kind of a place to house other organizations and people's documents if they wanted it to share it, but they didn't have the capacity themselves to have their own kind of.
So in the last few minutes, maybe Dylan, a couple things, if we could just, so obviously our call out is that we need a lot of help, you know, for archival researchers to do, you know, just basically uploading a whole bunch of documents, you know, so thank you, Kelly, for putting the word out. And I know that we've been constantly being delayed because we didn't have enough resources to get some sort of a hard drive or platform or something. So Kyle has donated an old computer in his closet, which is now becoming a repository for us. So, but then whether that is sustainable in the long run. So of course, looking for resources, additional resources where we can have down the line a dedicated whatever, you know, that's more technical language, server or platform, whatever that thing is. So that's really what our need is. But then, you know, Dylan, just to round it off, what should we be expecting next? Because this is like a soft launch, sneak preview. What are we looking at for like a hard launch, and when it will be out in public over the next few months? So if you want to briefly talk about that.
So the hard launch, or what kind of I've been envisioning for a hard launch, or we've been kind of talking about, is maybe it's not so much the form of the website, but it's like the development of our workflow. I think it would be really great to see, because right now it's we haven't been able to get to a place where we're working with community members, with youth, with Skid Row residents, etc., to develop folks on it. It's like that's kind of ideally the, you know, what I would love to kind of see get started, so that we have some kind of folksonomic, you know, metadata and information that can get added to the archive, so that, you know, it like it's closer to what we want the archive to be, or it's kind of it's kind of, that's how we see the kind of initial kind of developments there. Like that's kind of what I'm hoping, or that's that's my gauge for like, oh, like this is a hard lunch. But of course, like that's, it might be different for different people. Like I don't necessarily want to be like the arbiter of like, okay, well, we're not official yet, but at the moment, why this is being called like a soft launch is because the materials are being uploaded without as much context. So and yeah, and without as much metadata. So like which is totally fine. Like the impetus here is to like get these materials available online, consolidated, and that is so that it will be useful to coalition members, to organizers, that, and that is absolutely one of the functions for this archive. It's that it has efficacy in the present. It has, it's an active tool to help us organize. It isn't just, meant to preserve aspects of past events, right? So, so then that's, but because it has not very much context to these documents, that's why it's going to be called a soft launch. We also only have about 116 documents uploaded, and a lot of, and they're key documents, so that's great, and that's fine. And but we're also going to be in the coming months, Kyle is going to help us mass upload the documents, so the kind of thousands of documents that that kind of exist across all the CIPRAs, and it's just going to be uploaded without much context at all, right? So yeah, that's kind of the distinction I personally am making. Will people be able to search for documents across collections using key terms in taxonomy and or taxonomy? Yes, and I believe that, I believe from how Ben has explained it, the kind of search function on our website, it also OCR reads the PDFs. So people will technically be able to kind of search for any readable text that exists on all of these documents, and come up with results there.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you all. So hopefully, I mean, our hope is that by over the next, I'm not going to say 4 to 6 weeks, but maybe 3 to 4 months, maybe, hopefully, well, because I know we're going to go into some sort of an overdrive mode end of November, when Kyle is back, and just start this mass upload. So that was the idea, that at least and really ideally, if everything is in place, that'd be ideal. But based on our capacity, I think it's going to remain a work in progress, like everything else of the coalition. So hopefully we will be, I mean, one plan was to that we probably won't be able to have developed folksonomies for everything, but at least to develop some sort of a baseline thing. Just even starting with our folks in Stop LAPD Spying and LACAN members as well, just to get feedback on things and start uploading those. And then of course this thing with the youth, that would be super helpful in helping develop some folksonomies too. So hopefully I would say that, and please don't hold me to that, but please do hold me to that, maybe 3 to 4 months, by the end of March, we should be able to have right, Dylan? Hey, just say yes. So, but
Yes.
thank you, Jella. So yeah, so we should be able to have this out there, and yeah, and I know, Kelly, thank you so much for your support. I mean, you all just launched this incredible $1 Million Hoods just archive as well. So however we can we can get some guidance and some support, and just however that'll be super helpful as well. So yeah. Well, cool. So thank you, Dylan. Thank you very much for walking us through that. And now we're going to go on to part 2 of our community meeting today, and I will pass it back to Tiff. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, folks. That was really great to learn more about that work and what's been going on there, and inspire us to start looking at our documents as well and getting those organized. So thank you. Okay, so now for the remainder of the meeting, we did want to check in with folks and provide an update as to LAPD's budget. So this is something that LAPD did just release its budget for fiscal year 2023, 2024. They released it just this past Friday. It was on the agenda this morning at the police commission meeting. We did, send out an email letting folks know that that had been put out. It did get approved on the agenda today to be passed through to the mayor. And as folks know, here at the coalition, something that we are really interested in when that budget comes out is diving into it and taking a look at this very long, incredibly thick document and figuring out, okay, what is it that they are asking for? How are they, besides like just the amount of the funding that they're asking for, what are they telling us about how they're planning for the future, how they're strategizing, and what are some of these things? So I just want to pause for a second and see if folks actually, because I know we have a few folks with us who are part of our working groups, just wondering if folks did have a chance to take a look at that budget at all, and I'll drop it into the chat for anybody who's interested. But it is it's like a 700-page document. It's always a very large document. And if not, that's okay. Or also, bear with me a moment. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you for that correct link there. And also, I know, Naoko, I believe I heard you on the police commission meeting this morning, and don't know if other folks were able to be on that as well, but would love to hear if folks were able to join or listen in, and any thoughts that folks had so far. All right, and if not, that's okay. And what we'll do is we can get started. Before we are going to get into like what is actually in that budget. But before we do that, I did just want to have us take a look at what is the process for the budget, which is something that I always need to have refreshed for myself. So one moment. Okay. So this is actually information that folks can see on Kenneth Mejia's website. So you see the link there, and this is just a brief overview. I think it's actually far more detailed than this, and Hamid Shakir, you probably know even more about like what this process is, but just a snapshot for folks, because like we do kind of go into reactionary mode, like LAPD has just released its budget, and then it's like, okay, well, what happens next? So essentially, it released its budget. It's the proposed budget for that fiscal year, and it will go to the mayor. Has to go to the mayor by January 1st. So that is the process that has already started. Then there is this long ongoing process that I don't have a whole lot of detail on, but it essentially goes to city council, and I believe kind of gets sent around to different committees who kind of argue and debate on different points. And the entire thing has to be voted on. It looks like they have to adopt or modify by June 1st, and the entire thing has to be adopted by July 1st. So that's kind of the whole budget process overview. And Hamid, I don't know if you have anything to add about that, or anyone else, in terms of like what is important, because this is an ongoing fight for the coalition. We are fighting to decrease that budget. We are fighting to defund surveillance, and also to be just drawing a lot more attention as well as to what is this budget process? How can we engage with it? How can we be pushing back? What are these different points of entry? So yeah. So I don't know if folks have anything to say. Okay, Hamid, I see your hand.
Sure. So, one more thing, Tiff, that what they released on Friday was their operating budget. This is not going to be the whole budget that the city is going to be, or the mayor's office is going to be approving, because, you know, this was, the total budget is going to be to the tune of about $3.4 billion or so, once all the other liabilities are also included. But what we saw was the operating part of the total budget. Yeah, so almost $1.9 billion. So that's the one thing. And then secondly, you know, just as it was approved, as it said in Bahia's PowerPoint, that it's going to go to the mayor's office. And then I believe there's the Budget and Finance Committee who has a final look on this one, but it has to go to the CAO's office as well. So it has to go through a couple different you know, streams before it is finally submitted to the city council, which then gives it to the different committees as well. So these are just some of the things. I think the only other piece I would say is that and we made that point in our statement, and we released a statement. We can post the link to that statement in chat as well. Gosh, sorry. I just lost my thought. I was going to say something, but I'll pass it back to you, or to Shakir if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I can add something, and this is this is also building on something Tiff was saying of like, yeah, the budget is a window, not only into what they'll be spending on, but more than anything, like kind of how they choose to justify, like what are the political claims that they make when they're saying we need funding for this or that, like how are they framing everything? Because even this like 600-700 page document that they put out, like the sort of financial accounting parts of that are just like actually only a few pages. Most of it is like all these kind of LAPD strategic plans and like broader like documents about how they're trying to transform and all of that. And I think what stands out is how much of that is just it's like entirely in the language of reform, that, you know, every single thing that they're asking for more money for, you know, they're never asking for it saying like, oh, we need this to be able to like kill more people or like, you know, surveil or harass more people. Everything is actually like, if we get these resources, that'll improve our efficiency, that'll make us more accountable, this will help us be more transparent. Every single thing is justified through some of the same claims that reformers are making, you know, and thinking that they're making those claims as a critique of the police, that like, you know, that there's too much waste in the department, or that there's you know, that overtime isn't being spent properly, or that that there isn't transparency, that there isn't good record keeping, that there isn't, you know, that there's racial bias. All of these things, or that I mean, there's a bunch of stuff, there's sort of a bunch of greenwashing stuff that we see this time of like, they're saying they need more helicopters in order to spend less, like, or a helicopter is equivalent to 4 cars when they're pursuing a suspect or something, they say. So like, that's going to be less fuel used or something like that. So like, and, you know, you see these justifications throughout. And so I think that kind of gets to our broader, you know, part of our organizing, which is that it's not just about confronting the policies and the spending items, but it's also confronting kind of the language of reform, the production of kind of reform concepts, like the whole ecosystem that like feeds police reform, and that police then come in and use and say, oh yeah, okay, we agree with that. We need more money to do that. And obviously, you know, every single one of these budgets, every single year, LAPD's budget has been increased. The only thing that kind of changes in that is like whatever reformist packaging they put on it to explain this is why we need kind of more resources. This is how the police are in conversation with whatever kind of political like discourses exists around policing. And so, yeah, so the budget is kind of a real window into that. And we see a lot of different spending items that are all in the language of reform.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Shakir. And if folks like, what we can do is we can just take a little bit more of a look into like what is in the budget. Yeah, so some of the things, and I will just go back to sharing screen for just a moment. Okay, so this again is that chart that we were looking at, just tracking that increase. As Hamid mentioned, this is of the operating budget that is within the power of City Council and the mayor to make changes to. We see that going up and up. And then I just have a few slides kind of calling out some of the main themes of what is in the budget. So one of the big things, and we heard them talking about this today at the commission meeting, is hiring. So they're really concerned about hiring. They're not hiring as much as they want. They were saying today they probably met about 50-60% of their hiring goal this past year. They're looking to add 780 more people. And then even at the police commission today, they were saying, well, we don't think that's going to be enough because they're actually losing like 200. I think they said they lost 260 cops over what they would usually lose due to attrition in this past year. So they're losing cops at a faster rate. They're not hiring cops as much. So they're kind of responding really hard with like, what can we possibly do? And they like laid out this strategy of like, these are all the different things, including like using this bounce program to kind of see if 200 cops would come out of retirement and come back to the force, like all of these different strategies, they were laying out. So this is what we're seeing as a big focus on hiring. I have to go drink some water. And then also like all of these increased things to kind of be luring people in. So we see the hiring bonuses. We see from the police foundation, they're offering like to be paying for people's housing, also to be increasing their advertising budget, higher salaries, more overtime. And they specifically did lay out with the overtime. One of the things that they would be using that for would be to continue to be policing what they call sensitive zones. What they are referring to are the 4118 zones that are, I'm not sure if they are mainly in the downtown area. Actually, no, they're all, I think, across the city. Yeah, Hamid is nodding. That's right. Yeah, across the city. But these zones that have been designated as enforcement zones where people cannot sit, sleep, or lay upon the sidewalk. You cannot have your belongings there, and they're being very specifically policed. So police are continuing to planning to continue that type of work and using overtime to do that as well. So that's one of the things. One moment. Okay. Also, they are looking at renewing their fleet. So replacing 400 new cars, 50 new bikes, and also 2 helicopters, and then additional replacement vehicles through another fund, this fund called MICLA, which is usually the fund that actually is the one that buys helicopters for police. And then, oh, sorry. And then I did just add this slide. I thought it was interesting. They did have some additional information in there about helicopters used by LAPD. And so they did give us a bit more of a breakdown in terms of their fleet and how much they are flying, where they're flying the most. And we won't go through all of this, but essentially it was interesting to note they did put by area, by division that they police. They listed out how many calls that they usually have for helicopters and where they are using these helicopters the most. And what we see is that very much disproportionately in 2021, they were most heavily used in 77th Division, which is, or by 77th Division Police, which is like Hyde Park area, Gramercy Park area, That's 2,600 calls in a year, which I think essentially breaks down to about 7 calls a day for LAPD helicopters just in this 9 square mile space that is policed by 77th Division. So additionally, this is some of the surveillance that they were looking for, $10 million for an ongoing annual contract for body-worn video. So far, I think it's been about $70 million that have been spent on body-worn video since it's been introduced. More people to staff their records management system, looking for salaries for, yes, thank you, Hamid. Looking for salaries for 20 cops at their CSP, Community Safety Partnership Program. This is their main community policing program that they have at, I believe, 9 different locations across the city, actually focused in predominantly in the Watts area, also in, I believe, in a few different locations as well. In South Central LA, they have Harvard Park as a community safety partnership site. So they're continuing funding of police at those locations as well. And then they're also looking ahead to the 2028 Olympics and putting together a strategic planning team for that as well. And I think that was everything that I had. Okay, so that was everything that I had. Those were some of the highlights that we had from the budget. So I'll just pause here and see. Again, I kind of rushed through that, but first of all, if folks had any questions about that, or also again, if folks did have a chance to take a look at that, if there was anything that I did miss calling out there. Okay. And so essentially, where does this leave us in terms of what are the next steps for the coalition? For us, we actually have a number of different working groups that have already been looking at this type of information already. The coalition did start a working group, I think in 2020, that was called Defund Surveillance, and that was a collaboration with the Free Rads as well. And we launched our own website. Defund Surveillance successfully sued the city of LA for budget documents and pushed back on the fact that it was so hard to get this information about the budget from police and from the city, and the fact that it was just so obscured. And that group did a lot of really great work that we are continuing to build on today. So today we have a working group that is just within the coalition, still called Defund Surveillance. That is a group that we invite folks to join us at. We meet every Wednesday for usually 30 to 60 minutes. Is it at 3 o'clock? I think it's at 3 o'clock on Wednesdays, and that is an online meeting. Thank you. Matios facilitates that group. And yeah, if folks are interested in looking more at this information, essentially what we've been doing there, and Matios, I'll see if you have anything to add as well, but what we've been doing there is looking at that budget information, not just from, this year or the year prior, but looking back across time and really trying to get an understanding of what is it that LAPD has been spending its money on, how that has changed over time, and also pairing that with looking more closely at what is the harm of this technology. So, it's always presented to us in a certain way, or, presented with very minimal information at all. So for us, our job is to really uncover what is the harm of this technology. What does it mean that LAPD has just announced that its central focus this next fiscal year is going to be the records management system, and that it wants to hire 9 additional people to build that up and to be only working on data entry around that. What do we know about the records management system and how it is used to speed up data collection on folks and to compile it and to kind of make these analyses that end up criminalizing people, incarcerating them, putting them in jail. So that is some of the work that we're doing in that group. And again, I'll pause and see, Matios, I don't know if you have anything to add just about the work of the defund surveillance group, or to let folks know anything about what's going on there.
No, Tiff, you covered a lot, and thank you so much for that. This is Matias speaking. Yeah, so a lot of what we had initially been doing when the group started was, well, when we got those budget documents from the LAPD, was just sorting out like 14 years worth of LAPD based budget docs that were PDFs, and not even, yeah, so just really hard to sort through, and kind of turning those into an interface that like folks can use and explore more easily. And so we've been dealing with like inconsistencies in the names of line items from year after year, in turning that into something we can play with. And this is where I want to shout out the work of Naoko and Bria, who's not on the call, and Ryan, who is on the call, who are some great folks who are data analysts, or a couple of them, but also just into computer science and stuff, who were able to turn this into like just masses of PDFs that we were manually inputting into Excel sheets, into programs like Tableau. And then Ryan just doing some really cool stuff about those inconsistencies in line item names. So yeah, like we kind of need all skill sets, just because they're kind of turning it into something folks can use, but we also want just people who like might find different aspects of the budget interesting to help create popular education materials, Instagram posts from the stuff that we find. So yeah, everyone should tune in if you're into that kind of stuff, and you can just email us at stoplapdspying@gmail.com. I'll plug you in. Thank you, Tiff.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Matios. Yeah, very much appreciate the work that folks are doing there. It's a lot of information, so really appreciate that. And then, so that's one way that folks can join us in this fight as we look to learn more about the budget and be pushing back on that and building that fight as well. Also want to, Shakir, just as we're talking about our different working groups, I don't know if you'd be able to give us an update or anything on the academic complicity group. I can also come back to you in a moment. I can let folks know about, oh, there you're ready. All right.
Yeah, so our academic complicity work group meets at least once a month, on the fourth Monday of every month at 5 p.m. We've been doing those meetings on Zoom, but this past weekend we had kind of an in-person like just visioning session and stuff around this project that we want to do around the concept of data abolition. And that is a term that like even that I kind of just started hearing around coalition spaces as something that I think, we usually kind of think about as, or I've heard that term kind of in response to ideas of, well, if only the data was kind of cleaned up, or if only like data collection was happening on less biased terms, or if only there was better concepts of ownership of the data that we generate, or sovereignty around data, then that would be then a lot of the harms of big data or mass data or data mining, whatever, would be reduced. And in response to that, I've heard people, or like in the coalition, we've talked about, no, like, what does it mean to have a more fundamentally abolitionist approach to even so much reliance and collection on data in the first place? And so as part of, that's an idea that we've been talking about a lot, but haven't really kind of fleshed out. And so the academic complicity work group wanted to kind of do that, and also like show how like this kind of idea that we still don't fully have content for, like what is, like, as we develop that, what form do we do that in? Is that just something that we like come up with an idea and write it, or like, before we get there, what kind of learning do we need to do from our people and from the community even to figure out like what that concept means. So we kind of started developing a bunch of questions for what I think we're hoping will be like a community survey of what what data abolition means to you. What are some practices that that our communities have developed for kind of for example, like avoiding visibility to data collection practices, or like, you know, creating, like one example that someone shared was kind of immigrants, you know, having to kind of make up their dates of birth, or kind of having to like fabricate biometric information as part of kind of being able to survive in this country, or being able to, you know, access resources and those kinds of things. So like, you know, thinking of all these practices of like resistance to data, resistance to kind of having to be visible and being able to be searchable and those kinds of things. So yeah, we're starting to develop the survey, and we're going to be talking more about it this Monday, and we'll also be talking about some actions that we want to plan around confronting kind of the latest chapter of UCLA's complicity in developing the predpol algorithm and continuing to celebrate it and profit off of it. We've seen some indications of that recently, so we're thinking of some stuff on campus related to that.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you for that update. Yeah, and so a couple other of our working groups that I'll let folks know about. I think, Hamid, you might have mentioned already our community policing working group, but that is definitely one that, or I think you mentioned, community safety partnerships, but that is a working group. Again, if folks are interested in helping us push back on this LAPD budget and just helping us, be working to be dismantling these programs. And one of the groups that we have is our community policing working group. This is meeting, I think we have a working group meeting this coming Friday at 10 o'clock. And what we've been working on there is putting together a zine that is looking at some of the narratives that have been put out, excuse me, about community safety partnerships, and about, some of the so-called success or results of this program, and kind of looking more closely at what is the type of surveillance that is going on at these sites, and what is, this program that is called crime prevention through environmental design that they do on this site, that they term community safety walks, but we understand it to be actually a way that police actually gain even more surveillance and even more control of a space. So we've been putting that together, again, based on information that we got through PRAs into a zine. So if folks are interested in doing some of that work on, debunking community safety partnerships, you can join us there. And the last working group that I'll just mention is one that we kind of has been taking a pause, but very much still a lot going on with it. And so we want to invite folks to join if you're interested. We're going to restart our SARA working group. So the SARA working group, this is actually, SARA is a term that you would see in some of those documents that we see uploaded on the archiving website, because SARA is a so-called problem-solving model that LAPD has actually been using since, I believe, the 80s or 90s. And it was something that was tested by LAPD formally in Operation Laser, this program that was shut down through the efforts of the coalition and our partners. And so this SARA group that is today, what we're doing is the SARA policing model is something that is still being used by LAPD. It's still being used to target specific locations. So what LAPD does is when they are out on patrol, when they are, doing this surveillance of neighborhoods, they are looking for where are the problem locations. And these problem locations, they label as SARA locations, and they open up a SARA report. And it's called SARA because it has an SARA 4-stage process by which they go through and kind of decide how are they going to police this area? How are they going to make it so that people cannot possibly live here, so that they have to move away from this area? And so that is something that we are getting documents on as well, and going through, and we would love to have folks who are interested take a look at those as well. We do have some from the downtown area. We've got some documents on where those so-called problem locations are for downtown, and also for Boyle Heights and other areas as well. So if folks are interested, we are restarting that meeting. We do have a map going that maps the different locations, and we'd love to have folks join us for that. So let's see. Yep, we do have our information online on our website. Folks can take a look at some of these meetings that are there. That's always a great place to check in. You can also contact us if you're interested in any of these. But that is, as far as updates, that was everything that I had. So I just want to pause and see if, was there anything else? Hamid, Matios, Shakir, anything else we wanted to touch on?
And I just wanted to, thank you for all that update. I think just the scale of the work that's going on, and it's really been built by the community. I mean, that's been the way it has always been, and this is how, we have kind of done our work. So, I really invite folks to join us, and which kind of just brings us back to how we started the conversation on archiving. Because, I think it's really just, we owe it to, it's all multi-generational work. And as abolitionists, it's a multi-generational journey. It's not a delete button. But what sort of stories and what kind of just our own analysis on the ground based on people's lived experiences are we then leaving behind? And for people to future, folks who would be organizing, looking at some of these work, like we look back at, the work of Michael Zinzen and some of the folks back then who really kind of just fought and exposed a whole lot of fuckery that was going on in the 70s and early 80s and all of that stuff, exposing, just how LAPD's red squads were operating and things like that. So similarly, I think it's through this that, yes, it would be, sometimes it can be boring work because people are always wanting to have victory and responses, and those are good. But you know what? Those are like, it's really kind of laying a very solid groundwork and building a very solid narrative that is rooted in abolition and building power on the ground. So there's a lot of work to be done. So we're asking folks to join us. Please go to this link on stoplapdspying.org/calendar that I just posted, and would love to have you join the fight. Thank you, Tiff.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Hamid. Yeah, that will be it for us. I'll just see, though, if there are any community announcements, anything folks want to share.
Yeah, just if folks want to plug in with the social media surveillance fight that's kind of kicked off, we've got 3 smaller groups there. One working on outreach, one working on collective research, and one working on popular education material development. And a lot of this is about LAPD's usage of third-party social media software technologies directed at that. But it's also just about how, thinking about how the LAPD uses social media monitoring to craft narratives and like spread disinformation, and to facilitate political repression. So yeah, you could just email us at stoplapdspying@gmail.com if you're into any of those groups or that work generally. So right now the 3 groups I just talked about are meeting separately, which is outreach, popular education development, and research. So there are 3 separate dates, but I can email you those details, Lisa.
All right, so I think that's it, unless there are any more community announcements.
Well, I'm so sorry. We are meeting collectively on the 29th, so next week. So I can send details on that. Thank you, Hamid.
For the social media, is that right, Matis? Okay, thank you. Right on.
I
Okay.
don't want to get into
I have a
trouble.
community announcement.
I was just reminding that. So yeah, thank you.
Jella, I hear
Sorry,
you.
Jella, go ahead.
Okay, yes. So I'm organizing another Trans Day of Vengeance. It's gonna be this Friday at Sunset and Logan at 7 o'clock. Come support, you know, we're gonna rage together, you know. But yeah, so that's this Friday, Trans Day of Vengeance, Sunset and Logan. Yeah, there you go.
All right, I spelled Friday wrong. I tried to put that in. Thank you. That's much better. Thank you. Right on. Okay. All right. I think that is it then, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for all the updates. Thank you for all the work. And we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Tiff. Thanks, Dylan.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.